how did he end up writing a poem that 7 centuries and more after he wrote it is still read and still be thought of as one of the major contributions that a human being can make to our culture? Well, he was born, as you know, probably, in 1265 in a city called Florence. A city that, by the time Dante was of school age, had 70,000 people. 7,000, these are little details to impress you about how crucial, how important that city was. 7,000 boys and girls who got to school, public schools, were available to them. Dante was one of these people. He was born in a family that was somehow, he claimed, nobility and whatnot, but actually was an impoverished family. And he was even slightly embarrassed by the activities of his own father. He never mentions him, but we do know by poems that others have written against him, attacking him and attacking his genealogy, accusing the father of loan, being involved in loan and the kind of usury, activities of a usurer, lending money at a very high interest, and so on. When Dante, 2 events happened to him, private events happened to him when he was a child. The first is by the time he was 8 years old, his mother died. And the second, a little bit connected with it, is the fact that when he was 9 years old, he will tell us later, he met a young woman. He doesn't even know what her name is. That's the fiction of his own works. He knew because she actually was a neighbor. He calls her Beatrice. The way he goes on transferring all the love that he felt or wanted from his mother onto this young woman, we don't know, unless we're just involved in some kind of psychoanalytical speculations about his life. The facts we don't know. However, he does talk about her as if she were a mother to him. He describes her in the poem in very maternal language and the language of her great generosity, the generosity of love, actually. So these are the 2 events. And then he goes to school in Florence. And the school, for all these teachers, he'll have only one that he really will point out and will remember forever. A man by the name of Brunetto Latini. We'll see him later in hell. Like many other students, they all want to send their teacher to hell, but not you, of course. But this was that he does. He manages to. Who was this man? Why was he so important for Dante? Well, Brunetto Latini, we could call him. He's still talked about. If you ever happen to go to Florence and you read this kind of memorial stones that are all everywhere on the walls of the city, he was one of those who civilized the city of Florence. What was he doing? What did he do actually? Well, he was a rhetorician, first of all, in the mode of the Ciceronian tradition. A rhetorician is to say of a man who believed that politics and rhetoric go hand in hand. That rhetoric is the art of persuasion within the parliament, within the streets of the city, where large decisions can be made, that can be reached. This was the essential work of Brunetto Latini. Dante styles himself after Brunetto Latini. Brunetto Latini was not only a great teacher, he actually translated and commented works that we have by Cicero on rhetorical works of Cicero, in the belief that really the political problems are ultimately problems of speech, problems of argument. But he also was a traveler. He went to, we do know that he went to Toledo, the city of Toledo in Spain. He did bring in translations of even Averroistic texts. I will explain all these terms as we go on. And Dante admires him especially because he stands for the sort of teacher who gets involved in the political realities of Florence. Dante wants to follow him in that. Eventually, He will meet Beatrice again, writes a great poem inspired by her, which we'll be looking at next time, called the Vita Nuova. His teacher, Brunetto Latini, will die, and Dante decides to enter. We are already in 1290, decides to enter political life himself. It was his biggest mistake. It was his biggest mistake because political life in Florence really meant being in the throes of harsh partisan battles between the so-called Guelphs and Ghibellines. The issues are not so clear-cut. The Guelphs supposedly are those who really believe in the loyalty to the church. The others, the Ghibellines, also believe in the loyalty to the empire. The two institutions of the time, things are not that clear-cut as that, but sharply separable as that. We'll talk about some of the details about this. But Dante becomes an ambassador for the city of Florence, the way Brunetto had become an ambassador for the city of Florence, and he goes a little bit everywhere. He's sent to the Pope in the year 1302. He's sent to the Pope on an embassy, and he never makes it back to Florence. Machinations had taken place so that he would be banned from the city. Not only banned from the city, his property is confiscated, and there is the threat on him that should he return and should he get caught, he would actually be put to death. The year 1302 is the beginning of Dante's new education, a new experience. He goes into exile, and exile, which at the time was thought to be nothing less than the fiercest condemnation on anybody. Because we are, that's the medieval idea, we are, the value of each and every one of us depends on the position that we occupy within the city. To be within a city, not be a holder of a place within the city, means that one is actually nothing. So he goes literally begging from one city to another. Maybe he even traveled as far as Paris. We don't know that. But exile, though it turned out to be a harsh punishment, turned out to be also nothing less than a blessing in disguise, because it removed Dante from any sense of loyalty to partisan viewpoints. He was no longer to be a Guelph or a Ghibelline. He was no longer caught in this internecine wars. He now became nothing less than one who could occupy a transcendent viewpoint. This is what the story of the Divine Comedy is. How does one go from perceiving the world around oneself in this partial, provisional, fragmentary manner? How can one be pulling it together? And the Divine Comedy is the story of exile, being the removal of oneself from the city in order to best see what the problems of the cities can be. He ended his life in the year 1321 in a city called Ravenna, where he was buried. So that's the way he wrote the poem was in exile. The poem came out of this experience of exile.